Yeah, you could actually do off the couch while listening to Richie's Isolation Mix. If you've just joined us, you're very welcome. You've missed a good half-hour conversation between Joe Malloy and Owen Redden there, talking about his career, how he got good at passing, the pressures of playing with Ronan O'Gara, and lots more besides. Owen, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good, Ger. What's the crack?
The sun is rising gently, and looks like it's going to be another beautiful day out there in a world that we're not allowed to go out and sample.
The long old summer that this is going to be is going to feel very strange. Like yesterday getting out there, it's like this is June. This is June. I'm
Yeah.
100% convinced it is June, and it is to do with the weather, but it's also to do with the fact that nobody knows what date it is. So I'm not convinced it is still April because yesterday sure as hell felt like it's school holidays time or something like that.
Well, I mean, it definitely is school holidays. 0904 is what my clock says, which I'm assuming means it's the 9th of
Nonsense.
April, which means it's Thursday, the 9th of April as well. As I said, it's a public service where we remind everybody what day of the week it is. Did have a big, long debate with my 8-year-old yesterday about it being Wednesday. She was insisting it was Tuesday to the point where half an hour later I turned around to my wife and went, is it actually Wednesday? Is it Wednesday? Is it definitely Wednesday? We were like, yeah, because we got a text saying put the bin out. That's how we knew. So, the time is a flat circle thing. That was a bit of a cliche from whatever that was, season 1 of True Detective. Now I'm like, time might be a flat circle, and there might be many alternate realities that we're living in, and this is just the crappy one that we're currently involved in ourselves.
So you had a half an hour debate with your kid about what day it was.
Well, she was insisting it was Tuesday, and was like, she's a bit stubborn. I don't know where she got that. Really have no idea.
Could you not have checked your phone? No.
I was refusing. Well, I was busy. I was doing stuff. We were painting. Anyway, always with the facts to bring us down to divert the story from the important parts here on. How was your day yesterday? You've blown the internet up with your insistence that one type of biscuit is 66% superior to another.
Yeah, that's like I see people getting in touch saying that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but it's not really. I think you can take the opportunity to do a couple of things during the lock-in at the moment, and one of those things that I wanted to achieve was bring the rich tea biscuit down a peg or two because it doesn't deserve the grace in which it's held by a lot of people. I never understand the hype of it. It's always the most disappointing thing you can find when you open a cupboard. Even as a kid, you'd prefer a piece of fruit to a rich tea biscuit, I would have thought.
I agree. Do you think that the British government's handling of the coronavirus crisis impacted the low score that Rich Tea got?
100%. I think the British government's existence full stop. It probably impacts the rich tea biscuit. Like it seems that the digestive biscuit probably has more of a Scottish tilt to it when you look into the history of it. But the rich tea is very, 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 very English, and I would go as far as to say it is the most Tory biscuit out there.
I have a vague recollection of when I was a child putting butter and jam on digestives and having a butter and jam digestive sandwich.
Yeah, that's certainly been done. I think actually might find more rich tea people would actually put butter and jam on it. But that is exactly what I'm talking about. As a standalone biscuit, it is poor. You actually need to go to the fridge and you need to put a load of cholesterol on that biscuit, which is already not great for you. And that is the only way you can enjoy rich tea. Now, stepping it up to a digestive, that just takes it to a whole new level. It's close to perfect. We all know that the chocolate digestive is the greatest biscuit ever invented, but we won't get to that one for a while. I think Tommy Rooney was saying that he wants his beloved custard creams reviewed soon. I was thinking about putting the custard cream up against the bourbon cream at some stage soon as well. And there's a few other ideas. Like the one thing that perhaps people could be interested in this weekend is Cadbury Easter egg versus Nestle Easter egg, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to cause that level of controversy just yet.
I mean, that's very straightforward. That's a slam dunk win for Cadbury's all day long and twice on Easter Sunday. Let's not talk about this anymore because we can come back to this a little bit later on. But if anybody wants to get involved in that conversation, feel free to hurl your abuse through WhatsApp to us. 0879 180 180 is the number. If you can't remember that, it's 0879 as in 9 darts and then 180. So it's 0879.
I get so much joy out of that every time you say it.
180. I'm aware of what's happening there, by the way. Don't worry. You can also just use the hashtag OTB AM on Twitter. We should talk about a story that's on the back of the mail about how Alexander Seferin, who is the head honcho, is his official term at UEFA, he was never a big fan of the Euros as they were the constellation of games across 10 separate cities that he inherited from Michel Platini, and you'll notice that the next Euros is not going to be that way. So obviously, rather than wait and see how the experiment worked, they were like, no, this is a one-off, very unique situation. Now it turns out we already knew that a bunch of stadiums that were scheduled to host games next year already have bookings for the same date next year. So there is already a suggestion that some cities might be unavailable through double bookings. Now, some cities, given the effects of what's happening on them, are less than interested in having a bunch of tourists coming through the city in 12 months' time to watch a football match, which, is ultimately very understandable. And the piece in the mail presupposes that we are going to have mass gatherings in precisely the same way that we currently have them. So, fans standing beside each other, sitting beside each other, congregating and drinking and singing. And maybe that's exactly what happens. Maybe, between now and then, there are enough vaccines, everybody gets vaccinated, herd immunity happens, and COVID-19 is a thing that we all look back on and go, Jesus, amazing that we got through that. Maybe that's not what happens at all. The implications of this are that we could have a 5-city or a 4-city or a 1-country Euros next year, with occasional games being played in different places.
That is the implication. Like, I think we have to talk about this story with the assumption that life will be fairly similar to how it was before the outbreak of COVID-19. I think you're right to expect that there may be permanent changes to how we interact with one another, but I think we've got to expect or assume that that's not the case, just for the sake of this story. And this is a big story for Ireland, because you look at some of the venues that perhaps might not be able to host games, perhaps don't want to host games, that have clashes. Bilbao, Rome are two of the venues mentioned in the Mail story this morning. It is mentioned in the Mail online that the Aviva Stadium may have a clash. But in the back of the Irish Daily Mail this morning, Philip Quinn and his angle on it is that there is no clash for the Aviva Stadium. And just a quick look at the website, there is no clash at the moment. Very early to be planning stuff, but you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So Ireland have a chance now to get a bigger slice of the pie, which is hugely encouraging for an organisation that needs the cash. It's also an organisation, let's not forget, that kind of messed things up when it came to leasing the Aviva Stadium this summer. They weren't actually going to be playing the warm-up games that they qualified at the Aviva Stadium. They would have had to move them somewhere else to a smaller capacity somewhere in Ireland, whereas now I presume that they can rearrange that next year, perhaps get the Aviva a bit earlier next summer, play a couple of warm-up games in the Aviva, and then potentially have a couple of extra games. Like, I do wonder if there's going to be a land grab from somebody here. Are the FA going to step up and say, well, we can host the entire thing ourselves? Last summer, there in the summer of 2020, we had a lot of quarantined teams playing in the Midlands, carrying out the rest of our Premier League. We could actually run a tournament there, put it in Wembley, and maybe let's hook up with the Scottish Football Association as well, and maybe play a few games in Hampden or whatever. And then I wonder, could there be a further step to this where are Ireland and the UK going to team up for a World Cup bid? I think the answer to that question certainly seems like it is yes over the next few years. Could this potentially be a dry run for them to see how a tournament would run? I know that the other countries like Azerbaijan, for example, will not want to give up their slice of the pie in this whatsoever. But I just wonder if there could be a bit of a political manoeuvring over the next couple of weeks.
Yes. 100% will there be political? Yes. And some countries will seize this as an opportunity and see it as an opportunity to go, look, we're going to help our recovery along by showing everybody that we're open for business in 2021. And so it's an interesting story, and we'll wait and see, and we'll try and do some digging on this side to see exactly where the FAI think that is going to land. And so we have a few calls in with them already this morning to kind of check and see if they've heard or what they're hearing, even if it's back channels. So we'll bring you news on that on football.com across the rest of the day. The other thing that happened yesterday, obviously, was Colin Buig broke the internet with his Mount Rushmore of Cork sports people. He probably didn't, right? He probably didn't break internet in so much as there was some minor annoyance in some quarters about the fact that Jimmy Barry Murphy didn't make it. And after that, it was just people putting their own ones up, and which I think is totally fair, right? And that the whole point of this is that it's subjective, I guess.
The Jimmy Barry Murphy thing seems to have stuck in the craw of a lot of people, doesn't it? And I think, in fairness, you did raise the whole appeal of JBM yesterday, and I think there's an element with a few of these Mount Rushmores that people like us on the outside looking in to a county will never be able to tell the true meaning of a player. Of course, you look at Jimmy Barry Murphy from a cold outside perspective. He's great. He's a legend. He would get onto the Mount Rushmore pretty much any other county. But perhaps we just didn't give him enough respect yesterday, Ger. I know you did, but perhaps I didn't give him enough respect yesterday. Perhaps Colm didn't give him enough respect yesterday because people seem to be pretty hurt that JBM is not on it.
Yeah, they were ultimately very angry about that, and that's exactly the whole point about this. You're supposed to. We're talking about an actual mountain where we're going to put people's faces on, and it's unlikely that they're going to come down unless they're, the workmanship is shoddy. So I can see why people would be a little bit pissed off at this. I want to get to some of the comments. It is about iconic figures. This is from Gavin O'Connor. It's about. Is it about iconic figures? Because anyone from Cork who didn't go to Pres or Christians would have JBM top of that list. Rog is a legend, but rugby has really only played in 2 schools in Cork City. Pre-Celtic Tiger, most people didn't know if a rugby ball was pumped or stuffed. And that did, in fact, inspire Colm Bowie to come out and say that he didn't go to Pres or Christians. And obviously, Ronan O'Gara is a complete legend. And O'Gara's stats are off the charts. Like, he's still the highest point scorer in the Heineken Cup in history. He was. I think Colm said that he was the person who was the most synonymous with the success of the tournament in its opening. Was it opening 2 decades? Loads of core comments from YouTube as well. Dave Barry, Jimmy Barry Murphy, Peter Stringer for the try in 06, Roy Sonia, Christy Ring, Rog, Davy Russell didn't even get a mention. That was a complete oversight. That he wasn't mentioned. Sonia O'Sullivan, legit world class in her field, brought our nation to a standstill on numerous occasions. Keane abandoned his country because of ego, says Gary O'Driscoll. So Roy Keane is off several people's Mount Rushmore, even in Cork, which I was a bit surprised about. Terence Buckley says JBM ahead of O'Gara all day long. I've been getting this a lot by Terence, but I can't ignore what Rog achieved for Munster and Ireland. So Colm Bowie was actually in the YouTube comments last night fighting back and defending his guy, which was fair enough. And then we don't need to do Donegal, apparently, because it's already been done. Do we have the picture of the Mount Rushmore? Is 1, 2, 3, 4 separate faces, as it should be, of Michael Murphy, the LeBron James of the GAA, as I've said in the past, and that is an accurate reflection of what Mount Rushmore and Donegal should look like. I mean, the entire McHugh family are feeling a little bit. Hang on a second, what?
And Jim McGuinness, can I just go back to what? I know we've gone into this a lot yesterday, but what Gavin O'Connor was saying yesterday was really interesting debate between you guys on Twitter yesterday. But just on the point of there being 2 rugby schools, say, in Cork, does that not heighten the achievement of what Ronan O'Gara did even more? That if you say that rugby exists on the periphery of Cork society, then for him to become so synonymous with Cork and for him to be one of the beacons of life from Cork sport in a very crowded field, I think that just makes it all the more special. Like, I was definitely on the fence about a couple. I was on the fence about everybody outside of Roy Keane and Sonia O'Sullivan, let's face it, yesterday. But I think the way Colm actually argued it yesterday in his defence, I think he's made a very compelling case for Rog to the point where he would definitely be number 3 on the mountain for me, and somebody you wouldn't be chiseling away were somebody to make a strong JBM case, for example. It would be Christy Ring you'd almost replace with JBM. Yeah,
and that was the thing for me. I actually do feel that in some instances, having a representation from different sports is valuable, because you have to reflect the entire life of a county, and having GA is so important. Cork, obviously, for so long, top of the roll of honour in hurling. You could make the case for that being the single most important sport in the county. But what O'Gara did, was be a part of the team that changed Irish rugby forever. The expectations when he came in were that they would win 2 games, 3 games, 1 game, 2 games, 3 games in the 6 nations or the 5 nations. And that expectation went, no, we're going to win the tournament every year. And if we don't win it, it's cause for months and months of hand-wringing and controversy. And so, him and O'Driscoll and later O'Connell, but him and O'Driscoll at the start were the ones who gave us that sense that this is something that was possible. And so rugby isn't a truly global sport, but it is a more international sport than GAA, for example. It is played by more people, and he was an important figure in the global game for a very long time. There was one other thing, a recommendation for the Classic Game Club, Liverpool versus Palace, FA Cup 1990 from Connor Minchin. I think that's a 3-3 draw. Is that right?
Yeah, that'll be a Nathan Murphy special.
Ian Wright and Mark Brightline up front for Palace. Nearly certain. And most importantly, Chris McNulty, I paused my TV to watch Owen Sheehan eat biscuits, so you should too. This is obviously people sitting on their couch when you dropped the first edition of Bar Wars last night at whatever time was it, like 9:15, 9:25. Obviously, you've done your research on. This is when people feel like, I'm going to get something to eat. What am I going to? I'm not eating any rich teas after eating that. And you could eat 2 rich teas.
Or you pick the time when everybody actually is watching TV. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, good idea. David Carr says you could eat 2 rich teas for every digestive if you were watching much eat. Major overlook on Owen's part.
David, nobody is watching what they eat at the moment, I think is the response to that. But in the future, if life gets back to some sort of normality, absolutely. I think Chris McNulty's tweet as well, he said, I paused my TV for 4.5 minutes, at which point I realised that I'd banged on about this thing for clearly 3 minutes, way too long. I didn't realise it was actually that duration. I was sitting there wondering, why is this taking this so long to upload? And then afterwards I was like, because this is way too long and way too much time to spend on a subject. Also on the Palace-Liverpool game, it was 4-3, the 1990 FA Cup semi-final.
4-3, okay. To Palace?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, sorry, a mistake on my part. So the sports bulletin, it is, 17 minutes past 8 here this morning on Thursday, the 9th of April. I'm going to keep repeating that, so I actually believe it. Man City are believed to be in advanced talks with their players over a pay cut. Last season's Premier League champions did not furlough their staff. City could suffer a £100 million hit if the current season is not completed. Obviously, Manchester City have all the wealth in the world, though, so no one's kind of saying well done to any of the teams who are doing what they should be doing. Not all cities may host Euro 2021 games that have been slated to do so. The Irish Daily Mail are reporting Bilbao and Rome in particular may not stage matches. Dublin is due to host 4 games and could be in line to accommodate more. Premier League players have created a fund to directly help the National Health Service in the UK. Players Together is the name of it, and they say they'll be distributing money to where it's needed most. The initiative has been spearheaded by Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson, but has been joined by many Premier League footballers. The fund will help enhance the well-being of NHS staff, volunteers and patients impacted by the coronavirus. Players Together has been welcomed by UK politicians who had previously been critical, of course, of the response from football. Real Madrid players, management and officials have agreed to take between a 10 and 20% pay cut. The size of the cuts are dependent on how the Spanish season ends. Football in Spain obviously is suspended, with hopes that the Liga season can resume in June, which seems very soon given the death toll at the moment in Spain. Gaelic Games Semple Stadium is getting a facelift. Tipperary County Council have greenlit plans to renovate the Thurles Ground's old Canaan stand, and the redevelopment will include new dressing rooms, media facilities and a gym. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. You've already missed Owen Redden. We've talked about some of the main stories today. The sports page is coming your way now. Andy Mitten's going to join us at 8:30. We have a lockdown lowdown coming your way at 8:50. Ray Moylett's going to join us at 9 o'clock. A crappy quiz, a slightly boozy crappy quiz at 9:20. And the player ratings from season 3 of Better Call Saul are coming your way at 9:45. We're going to start now with the sports pages.
OTB AM.
So first up, we have offtheball.com for you this morning, and the homepage there. Jordan Henderson leads #players together in helping the NHS, and a couple of other stories there. I'm jumping around like a lunatic in this studio. Pat Nevin on missing the 2012 Champions League. So that's doing a feature in the evening about classic Champions League and great stories and matches in history. And Pat Nevin was this week's guest talking about Chelsea. UFC. Well, the UFC had a crazy plan where they're going to try and proceed having some fights on Native American tribal land. We'll wait and see exactly what happens with that. In rugby, great story here with an amazing picture. We weren't rugby players, we were weightlifters. This is from Brian O'Driscoll and Ron Lagarde's piece the other night. And the picture that we have illustrating that is Brian O'Driscoll doing weights. I was like, I'm asking you who you think he looks like in this photograph. And what was your answer?
Well, I kind of came up with no one. Tommy was suggesting Sean O'Brien.
I thought he looked like Richie McCaw in the picture. But it's interesting. We both went for back row forward. So this is obviously the point he was talking about. That I think this is the build up to 2007, where they just let the strength and conditioning get out of hand and came back big and slow, as opposed to actually coming back ready to take on the world. And that was one of those great opportunities missed. But yeah, so that's what's on offtheball.com. Loads and loads and loads of stories, and loads of people are tuning into offtheball.com every day now for the very latest on their sports news and what's happening. So keep doing that. Obviously, sorry, the review of Kieran Bradley's reviews of Sunderland Till I Die, it includes the phrase "the smell I want," and I'm on board with anything that includes the phrase "the smell I want."
Absolutely. They're great pieces. They're worth checking out. I'm going to move on to the Irish Independent this morning. They lead with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's interview with Gary Neville. Solskjaer saying United can exploit transfer market during crisis. This caused a little bit of controversy. Gary Neville has come out to say that he perhaps shouldn't have used the word exploit in his question to Solskjaer, which was basically around the idea that a club like Manchester United with huge reserves of cash could potentially exploit the situation of the transfer market afterwards, because the rich will probably be hit a little bit less than the poor clubs, and I should say the poorer clubs, and how they will react to these comments from Solskjaer remains to be seen. You've also got El Buzetti here, Zach El Buzetti, who's been in conversation with Dan McDonnell about Stephen Kenny and how he's going to let stars shine. He's, of course, been somebody who's played under him at under-21s, so giving a bit of insight. And then the main photograph on the back of the Irish Independent this morning is Tiger Woods wearing his green jacket, having some dinner. Today, it kind of makes you feel a little bit sad. Today was the day that the Masters was supposed to tee off.
The Irish Times Sports Thursday, Pro 14 sides face €15 million loss of TV money if league not completed. Bernard Laporte has been saying as well that it's possible there won't be any club rugby in 2020. There'll be internationals at the end of the year, and club rugby will come back in January 2021, which is as credible an outcome that I've heard suggested as any of the other outcomes that have been suggested so far at this stage, given that we're in a complete phase of uncertainty, and the unknown unknowns that are still to present themselves must be the overriding kind of sense of what's actually going to happen here. Johnson's trip to Twickenham cited as reason for go ahead. This is a Guardian story about why Cheltenham went ahead. Get into that a little bit later on. Mourinho admits public park training session was wrong during crisis. Oh shit, Sherlock. And Dave Hannigan had a column, which I haven't had a chance to read yet. Hurling advocate Dowling at the sharp end of COVID-19 fight. Decades in America have not loosened the bonds with home or diminished his capacity for testifying about how hurling shaped him and his outlook. I look down on other sports, he said. So even in the midst of the pandemic, hurling snobs are still being heard and having columns written about them. And, you know, never change, hurling snobs, never change.
Speaking of hurling and people who like to bask in the greatness of the game, Kieran Shannon's column today is the hurlers who talk the talk as well as they walk the walk. So he's saying here that everybody seems to be doing every county's Mount Rushmore at the moment, and everybody seems to be picking their favourite games, that he's gone for something a little bit different at the moment. In his column, he's gone for his best interviewee hurling 15. So not just the great players. But, yeah, it is. It's a great idea. The team is Joe Quaid in goal, Anne Downey, Anthony Daly and Carl Freeman, the full back line, Tony Brown, Brian Corcoran, Larry O'Gorman, the half back line, Dennis Coughlin and Kieran Carey in midfield. A half forward line, which is a half forward line here is pretty class. Eddie Brennan, Henry Shefflin and Tony Griffin, and then a full forward line of Shane Fitzgibbon, Tommy Guilfoyle and Conor Cusack. So it turns out being an interesting interviewee does not necessarily mean you're an average hurler or an average camogie player or manager whatsoever, because that's a quality team.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing. It's like, these are all pretty good, you know, many All-Stars, many All-Ireland medals between them. So maybe that helps as well. Right. So the Irish Daily Mail, Euros revamp, Dublin could get extra games if other nations drop out. Matt Hughes has this story in the English Mail. Philip Quinn has obviously added some Irish details on it as well. They're saying Sportsmail has learned the Spanish and Italian FAs have both expressed doubts about honouring commitments to host games in Bilbao and Rome, given the large death tolls and economic suffering they have experienced over the last few months. From an Irish perspective, the FAI remain committed to hosting games at the Aviva next year, and there are no other major events scheduled to be held in the stadium next summer. Dublin venue is obviously scheduled to host 3 games, and one match from the round of 16 from the group, so 4 in total. If other nations opt out, there is the possibility of the Aviva being asked to stage additional fixtures. And again, I suppose look, will the Euros go ahead? Will people be allowed to travel from country to country? I mean, at the moment, you can. So you would assume that if we haven't locked our ports now, we might never lock our ports. So maybe in a year's time, a vaccine has dropped and if you've got papers, you've been vaccinated, you're allowed to come in, and away we go. And we corral all the tourists down to Temple Bar, and this helps kickstart some sense of, I don't know, all of us coming out of this.
Yeah, possibly. Like it is still summer 2021. I think the idea of what you mentioned there a moment ago of rugby perhaps facing up to the fact that it'll probably be the start of 2021 before they actually get club rugby underway. I think that even at that point, you're skeptical about whether or not there will actually be supporters at those games and how long behind closed doors support will go on for after it comes back. And I think with football, that's just amplified because you've got all this fanfare around the game. You've got international movement, particularly with a tournament like this, and like it just seems like the furthest thing away from our current situation. And to say that it might be over a year for it to return, I think it almost feels like a fact at this point. It almost feels like it's an inevitability that it will take more than a year for us to return to that. I'm going to move on to the Irish Sun this morning. They're leading with Sadio Mane's comments. People matter, not the title. Sad situation, but public comes first. Mane here coming to terms with the prospect of Liverpool not being crowned champions, but says there are more important things in the world at the moment. Green tea at Tigers is the headline, with his photograph of him having dinner in his green jacket. Jose Park strife, Spurs boss is slammed. Jose Mourinho, of course, apologised for going to Hadley Common and working out with Tanguy and Ndombele. Yesterday, it has been confirmed that Ndombele walked home with 2 other players. He was Sessegnon and I can't remember who the other player was. God, it's just slipped my mind.
Davinson Sanchez,
Davinson Sanchez, and they did, according to an eyewitness, keep 20 meters apart. So the 3 of them met up, but kept good social distancing. So it's not been all bad for Spurs. They haven't completely disregarded it. But Jose was saying stuff yesterday like it's essential that we all do our part. It's clearly not essential in somebody's eyes or some people's eyes.
They, in my head, they all live in one of those shared living spaces that we were going to be building loads of until this all happened. You know, with the same kitchen and common area, and then like room for a single bed and maybe a jacks in your room. That's that's where those 3 footballers live, right?
I think Ryan Sessegnon, when he goes home, actually has to pull his bed out from a cupboard to actually go to sleep.
Top of the morning to you comes from the Mirror. I should have been the spatial one. Spurs fury at close quarters training. Jose's apology to NHS heroes for risky public park session. I should have been the spatial one. And then that's class. I won't hear any bad words said about that headline writer. And then the headline above that is Ole warning, we'll spend. And there's a picture of Jack Grealish. Look, you're not supposed to say these things. And he was asked a question, and at the same time, I don't know, is there going to be a pile-on here because he's talking about the transfer market while 900 odd people died in England yesterday? Like, this is on a daily basis. The rolling death total in England is absolutely shocking, and you know, it feels like it could have been avoided if they'd gone into lockdown a little bit earlier. Certainly, they would have slowed it down. But is it unseemly to be talking about this, or is it actually the right thing to be doing, to be going ahead with business as normal?
Like, he's talking about when business resumes and what happens when business resumes. Like, as you say, he's asked the question. Gary Neville has said that he shouldn't have used the word exploit. People can use a word not intends to use the word in the sense that it's always intended. It's not a great word to use in that sense. But I think to enrage like the public to the point of a pylon at this point, I think would just be a little bit OTT. Like, what are you supposed to do when a question like that is asked? What are you supposed to do when you say the wrong word? Like, you say, right, I could have used a different word. But I think it's a bit of it's not a huge story whatsoever. And like you say, is there going to be a pylon? I don't think there has been a pylon so far. And I'd have a little bit of sympathy, certainly, for Solskjaer in this situation if it becomes a story. I've got the Irish Daily Star here. Jose Mourinho there again saying, I was wrong, regret at public meetup. Vinnie Perth on managing in lockdown, he's been spoken to in the Irish Daily Star. There's a Conor Myler exclusive. The Tyrone footballer has said, we can't hug my mother. She's a frontline worker and has to stay in a room by herself. Mane says, I will wait for title glory. And Manchester United aim at transfers.
London Times have a picture of Ronaldinho under house arrest over a fake passport. This has been like any other time we would have been like going a deep dive on this story, just how amazing and ridiculous the whole thing is. But he's in Paraguay. He had a fake passport. He was released on bail. I was the last I read, but it was like bail of 1.3 million or something absolutely ludicrous. So he's in a bit of trouble. He's in a spot of bother, and there's pictures of guards with a mask on, but you can see that is Ronaldinho, the footballer. Mourinho told off by Mayor Farah's data to be examined while all this is going on as well. The circle around Mo Farah is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The new chief executive of UK Athletics has said that she will hand over a 2015 report to anti-doping officials that includes Mo Farah's medical data. And City closing on pay cuts is the story we've already spoken about. Manchester City are in advanced talks with their players about wage deferrals the Times can reveal. So City coming out now and saying they're ready to go with that.
It's that story about Mo Farah and UK Athletics as well on the back of The Guardian this morning. Colts wants ethical success. UK Athletics head pledges to hand over Salazar Farah report. Got a picture there of Ben Stokes as well, an Englishman who joined the national conversation. He's been named the world's best cricketer. And Mourinho admits training for Ndombele was a mistake. A couple of other stories then there as well. Alderweireld's agent defends players against salary cuts. The one thing that we can say, like, it's just in relation to this Solskjaer story, is that I think we would all have genuine sympathy for kind of a word being misplaced here or there, and I think a pylon would be wrong. If it were an agent and there was a pylon and an agent was talking about exploiting the transfer market, that is when things would be properly sickening, and that is when a pylon would probably be borderline acceptable. Not that pylons are ever acceptable.
Well, that's the thing. I think that we're just a little bit anxious to avoid pylons at the moment. There seems to be a lot of encouragement for pylons at every available opportunity, and not really going to help the mental health of the nation. In the Telegraph this morning, SPFL proposes the termination of campaigns in lower leagues, which would be, a full stop on all of those seasons, which might not be the worst thing that's ever happened. Pay deadlock leaves clubs heading for cliff edge. This is the talks between the PFA and the Premier League and the FA are not going very well. And experts want spitting on ball banned over infection risk. So this is how sport is going to end up dealing with. This is a cricket story, but obviously it kind of goes, spitting on the pitch, one of those things that you're like, do we need to do that? The way that players and cyclists clean out their nose and it goes everywhere. You see joggers still doing it. You're like, oh, come on.
Like what? That was never.
Should we ban
that was never a
spitting?
thing to do.
What?
Like, I don't know. Okay, like to people who exercise and stuff like that. Like, what difference is it going to make? I guess if you're actually playing contact sport with somebody, but people who spit unnecessarily, that should never have been a thing. Is my point. If it's not, if it's necessary in a sports pitch, whatever. I fear that is possibly a wormhole that we could delve into. I need to get through the Herald very quickly. Zach is back in Kenny. Ed Buzzetti here again. This is the Dan McDonald story. Players will relish freedom. And Lowry never imagined life without playing golf.
Yeah, well, okay, we'll get to that. I really look forward to your deep dive on the merits of spitting on a football pitch or while jogging on. This could be the hottest of hot takes that you've ever had. 087 180 180 is the number. If you want to get in touch with us by WhatsApp, you can use the hashtag OTB AM. Now, it is 8:34 this morning here. Tonight on Off the Ball, absolutely thrilled to say that we're going to be joined by Shane Lowry. He's caught up with Nathan Murphy yesterday afternoon with thanks to the Bank of Ireland. Here's Shane talking about how he's been dealing with everything in recent weeks.